Just Energy with naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theories that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swing of a pendulum to the waves in the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. In the same way, things such as rocks and minerals vibrate very slowly and at speeds that are imperceptible to us. Living things such as plants, animals, and man vibrate faster and appear to be alive. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is if we take everything in our own universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita as she explores questions such as, what are we made of? Why do we get sick? How can I live a more balanced and whole life? Call in and talk to her and her thought-provoking guests. Send us your questions and get the help you need to move beyond any obstacle or challenges that may be affecting your life, right from the source. So stay tuned and explore your possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics, AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. To keep informed of the upcoming show schedule, please visit www.justenergyradio.com and sign up for our newsletter. And just also to let you know, Just Energy Radio has just celebrated the completion of its 4th year of airtime. We're starting on our 5th, and all of the archives, all 4 years of archives, are available at the justenergyradio.com website. And before we bring our guests on, let me ask you this question. Are you dissatisfied with the path your life is taking? Well, it's time to move past the crossroads in your life and bring peace, harmony, and health back into it. For the past 20 years, I've been helping individuals just like you discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationship, go to www.soulhealer.com and schedule an appointment today. I would love to help you live a life that you've been dreaming of. So today I have 2 guests on. In the first hour, we'll be speaking with Kevin Cook about Marian Apparitions. And in the second hour, we'll be talking to Jason Martell about Planet X and all those mysterious things that are going on our planet. So let me tell you a little bit about Kevin and get him on the air so we can talk about Marian Apparitions. Kevin Cook is a student of the paranormal and a former minister. Upon converting to Catholicism, he experienced some very moving paranormal events. This encouraged him to investigate Marian apparitions, a topic that has always interested him. He has a BA from Upper Iowa University, a master's in theology from a Protestant seminary, and he has been accepted at the Franciscan University Graduate School of Theology. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Kevin Cook. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Hi, Rita. Good to be with you.
Kevin, I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
For those that are not familiar with the term Marian apparitions, what is a Marian apparition?
Well, it comes in different forms. Predominantly, the Virgin Mary would actually physically appear to people who are called seers. Basically, the witnesses are called seers. Usually it's a speaking apparition, although some of them, like in the Zeitoun, Egypt example, have actually been non-speaking ones, just visual ones. But classically, what you'd be considered is actually Mary would actually appear to the seers and witnesses and present a message when she did.
So we're talking about like Mary, the Mother of God, Mary,
right?
Correct?
Right. Jesus' mother, Mary, right?
How did you? I mean, it's such an interesting topic, and that's why I was so glad to have you on. How did you become interested in this field in the first place?
Well, I've always had a direction towards being interested in paranormal things, and I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. And, in the late 60s, my father was a big engineer and associated with the Coast Guard at different times. And I asked him about the Bermuda Triangle and UFOs, things of that nature, which was making the press a lot. If you remember, back in that era, Charles Berlitz wrote the book, The Bermuda Triangle, and it was quite a topic of conversation at the time. And, he's a flinty old engineer, and I thought he was going to say, oh, it's all baloney and don't worry about it. But he said, to the contrary, he actually indicated that, yes, the Bermuda Triangle did have UFOs and phenomena that was unusual. And we had another little thing relative to our neighbors. Some of our neighbors in Fort Lauderdale were Eastern Airlines pilots. And I don't know if you remember the Ghost of Flight 401 with Ernest Borgnine. That was a movie that came out in the 70s. Maybe it's something you didn't know.
If I said I did, I would be totally dating myself. So
that's
maybe.
Okay. That's okay. But it was a pretty big movie in the late 70s, or mid to late 70s, and in essence what it was Ernest Borgnine played the role of an Eastern Airlines navigator who was on a plane that went down in the Glades, and Eastern Airlines, for some reason, cannibalized a lot of the parts from the wreckage, and in all the planes they reused the parts in, the plane actually became haunted with the navigator that Borgnine, played in his part. And our neighbors on our street in Plantation, Florida, a suburb of Fort Lauderdale, had actually seen this ghost a couple times. And remember, these were very credible people, Navy pilots, military pilots, things like that, ex-Navy pilots. And that was my entree into things unusual. And I've always had a religious bend. And to bring the story up to speed, I converted to Catholicism about 5 years ago. And rocked along. I've always been interested in Marian Apparitions, kind of back burner kind of thing, things I'd read. But what I did is I made a trip up to your neck of the woods, up around upstate New York. And I was on a real estate buying expedition in September 2008, and I, looked at the real estate, went to Cooperstown Baseball Museum, did all the things you normally do as a tourist up there, and the day before I flew out, I was going to just spend around the Fultonville, Auriesville area, being a tourist around the Mohawk Valley. It's very pretty up there. And I ran across Our Lady of Martyrs Shrine in Auriesville, New York. And I said, I wasn't intending to. I didn't know there was a shrine. I just happened to run across it. And I was there about an hour and a half, and Rita, for the first 45 minutes of that hour and a half, I smelled an overpowering, cloying, knock you down smell of roses. Enough that and understand this was on a little plateau. It's about a third of a mile up. It's about on a 50-acre campus, and it's very windy. It's not a lot of there were no flowers around. It was September. There were no flowers around except maybe a handful 20 acres away from where I was. And no services going on where there was any, perhaps, incense being burned or anything of this nature. Basically a very rural setting. And this is a powerful, cloying thing that went on for like 45 minutes. And I have allergies. I'm not, a big, I'm basically no bloodhound. I mean, for me to smell something, it has to be pretty potent. And just because I was in New York for a couple of days doesn't mean the allergies were all cured. And what I did was I went to the museum up there, and I asked the curator up there, I said, look, I sell trees for a living. What do you have up here that's so fragrant in the plant department? And the lady up there had been there 12 years, and she looked at me in a shocked manner, and she said, you smelled it too? And I said, well, I guess I did. And she actually showed me on a map where I probably smelled the smell in the strongest sense, experienced it in the strongest sense, and she was accurate in her depiction of where I did. And what it is, in short, is it's a phenomenon called the odor of sanctity that's associated a lot with Catholic shrines and Marian apparitions. And I guess my previous experiences plus this is a push kind of realizing the validity of these things caused me to delve further into Marian apparitions, and 2 years later I had the book written. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of how I came to be interested in it. But I can say the more I did it, the more I researched, it was very, very fascinating. The more I researched, the more I realized how well authenticated it was. We're talking millions of witnesses, physical evidence. Rita, it's the most well authenticated example of paranormal items I've ever run across. Beats ghost hunting, hands down.
Well, they don't mess around. The Catholic Church, if they're going to say something is true, they want to have all their I's dotted and T's crossed.
They definitely do. They definitely do.
You talked about that smell, and so it sounds like other people have had that experience, the smelling of roses or the smelling of flowers in some of these, and I'm going to call it sacred sites, sacred locations,
right,
for lack of a better term.
Exactly. The curator up there, I guess I should have said this too, the curator had been in her 12-year span. She said every now and then someone did come in and experience this phenomenon. It wasn't very frequent, perhaps once a year or less. She'd been there 12 years and she hadn't, but it is something that she did experience up there. And once I looked into that further, it's a lot more widespread than you'd ever imagine. For example, I've been divorced and I'm trying to get an annulment through the church here in Keller, Texas. And the lady that's handling my annulment for me actually experienced it herself. She and some of her relatives were in a hospital right around a sick bed format with her stepmother, and the whole load of them, all 6 of them in this room, smelled this phenomenon enough to make them all start breaking out saying the rosary. In other words, this was not, say, imagination or fantasy. This was hardcore experience, and it's been replicated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and frequently associated with Catholic saints, too. So...
And I guess it's not necessarily, I was getting the impression that it was tied to a location, but it sounds like it might be tied more to an emotional experience that it ends up manifesting in that way.
Well, it's
You're
both.
losing me a little bit.
It's hard to get a real grip on it from the standpoint that it's associated with locations to some extent too, yes, but also in individual circumstances separate from a location. Like, for example, there have been Marian sites like in Laos, L-A-U-S, that was a site of a major Marian apparition the churches approved back in the 1600s. And that whole episode was associated with the odor of sanctity and the smell of roses. And there have been other Marian apparitions that have, too, but it hasn't been 100% isolated to apparitional sites. Sometimes, like in the lady's example from the church, it's just associated with, like you say, an emotional experience. It's kind of like an element of an emphasis of the Holy Spirit, or a manifestation of the Holy Spirit, you might say.
Interesting. Question: the person who had the experience in the hospital or that group, did the person that they were visiting, did they get well?
No, they didn't. They didn't. I think, it's hard for me to explain why they had that phenomenon, but I think it was a assurance from God that things are going to be all right, that they were concerned certainly about their loved one, but I guess the element or ray of hope that this wasn't all there was to it, and I think that it was a calming influence on them from that standpoint. But no, they did not get well, no.
I mean, because that would just, add to the story, but I can see where, helping people cope or deal or feel relieved by the experience, there would also be benefit, maybe not to the person who was ill, but to everybody else.
Exactly. This was such a moving experience, Rita. I'm an old Army sergeant and salesman. I'm not, really easily rattled, but after that experience, I sat down on a bench up there for the second 45 minutes, just completely shocked, like I'd been blackjacked. I mean, that's how moving an experience it was. So it was a real deal. It was a real thing.
That's cool.
It was very positive, but and very uplifting. But like I say, that the whole Marian apparitional field is replete with this experience, and I guess that plus all the other experiences tied together, caused me to write the book.
And when we talk about Marian apparitions, I think the most famous one, or the one that people are most familiar with, is Our Lady of Fatima.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the appearance, to the 3 little children, is that one of the first Marian apparitions, or do they go back further in time?
Well, actually, they go back all the way to 40 A.D., way back when Mary was still living and walking on the earth. the first one recorded was 40 A.D. That was Our Lady of the Pillar. It happened in Sargasso, Spain, where the Apostle James was trying to basically evangelize the local Spanish people in that area, and he was having a tough time with it. Mary appeared to him kind of as a uplifting experience, telling him not to be, disgruntled and not to give up, basically. And that's connected with a lot of these apparitions, or every apparition really, is a pivotal timing element. It's not just a will-o'-the-wisp kind of thing. It's really a very important time and place in history usually when she shows up. And I'll explain a couple of them as we go. But the Fatima one was very, very pivotal. It was right before, the Second World War, it was before the rise of communism, and it dealt a lot with prophecies the Virgin Mary relayed to those three children, because there was three little peasant children in Portugal that were the seers, that is, witnesses to that example, and everything they relayed from the Virgin Mary was written down and recorded. And these kids wouldn't know where Russia was on the map. They're barely literate, let alone being familiar with geography. And they explained that she explained to them that Russia was going to have errors, meaning the allusion to the rise of communism. And like I say, these were just peasant kids. They wouldn't know Russia from Milwaukee. And that and other secrets that were relayed to the children that came about were just phenomenal. See, that's another aspect that lends authenticity to this phenomenon is, information that's passed to these seers, and it comes about in short order. That's very dramatic, very dramatic. That plus physical evidence, this is really quite the intriguing field. It really is.
And in the situation with the Lady of Fatima, the children were given 3 prophecies, and 2 were shared, and then there was the third mystery one.
Yes.
That, I'll say is the subject of conspiracy theory these days as to whether it was actually disclosed, and then there were some people that said, what was in there was that Pope John Paul, let's get it right, something was going to happen to him, and, or he got shot, and that was the fulfillment of the prophecy, but then other people say, well, that's not really it. Do you have any insights into actually what the other 2 prophecies were, and then especially the third one?
Well, the other prophecies basically had to do with the Second World War coming as a coming event, and the rise of communism. These were the essence of the first 2 secrets. But the third secret really is a very controversial element. The Sister Lucia, who was the primary seer, died not but 2005. She lived a long, long time. And but she had a subsequent visit from the Virgin Mary in the 40s in the convent, and she was told not to she was told to write down the third secret in clear-cut form, and have it conveyed to the Pope, but to have the Pope not release this information until 1960. All right, now here's where it gets kind of interesting, is every Pope for 40 years refused to release the secret of Fatima, okay? And if it was just something like the assassination attempt on John Paul II, that doesn't seem like something that would be, scary or, worth keeping that secret. Not that consequential. But every pope for all those many years refused to release the information. Finally, in 2001, they did release the information with the idea that it had to do with a matter of faith and issues of faith. In other words, trying a very broad, generalized allusion to the prophecy, not in clear-cut terms. But here's something I'm going to read you relative to that. It's very short. But in May of 2010, there was a group called Fatimists that met in Rome just on this issue. And some of the members were pretty well-educated and sensible people. A fellow named Christopher Ferrara was a U.S. attorney, still is a U.S. attorney, and he was quoted as saying this, quote, "The evidence points to only one conclusion, that something has to be missing. Only a minority clings steadfastly to the notion that an ambiguous vision of a bishop dressed in white outside a half-ruined city is all there is to the secret, end quote. That comes from the Catholic News Service. In other words, here's a guy that's obviously very well educated and knows about testimony and evaluating things, and he is skeptical of it being just an assassination attempt or a ruined city or something. It has to be something truly dramatic. And there have been some people that have speculated that it has to do with perhaps the abuse issues in the church, or the falling off of the Catholic Church in Europe as far as numbers and faithfulness. I mean, there's been several different speculations, and even some apocalyptic claims, like, really heavy circumstances relative to the Earth itself, like a polar shift, or, I mean, there's all kinds of speculations to what it could have been. My own personal understanding is that one of the key factors that Cardinal Ratzinger, who's currently the Pope, when he wrote about this, he said that the essence of the secret of Fatima was about issues of faith, which is still unclear. But in his letter, one of the things was that, and also relayed by the Virgin Mary, was that Portugal will always retain its faith as a country. Basically, that's a paraphrase of it. In other words, if Portugal has, then what hasn't? And basically, you've had a decline in the Roman Catholic Church in Europe, and it potentially could be that the Church's prominence in Europe is what that was alluded to in the Third Secret. I don't know, but it's very much a matter of controversy, and I have to believe the Fatimists, like this Christopher Ferrara, that there's definitely a lot more to it than just, an assassination attempt. But
it just, gets fueled with the whole conspiracy thing, which always makes it more interesting.
Well, it is interesting, and the Church, I love the Church and all that, but they're not always the most forthcoming in explanations. And I think that isn't to say that they're not well intentioned, because they do have a pastoral position and they're trying to look out for us, not alarm people. But I do think that yes, they're sometimes they're guilty of holding their cards close to their vest, you might say, on different factors. But one thing on this, that on Fatima as a whole, there was 100,000 people, Rita, 100,000. The culminating apparition in October of 1917, when they had the dance of the sun that people saw at that time, 100,000 people were witnesses to this. And not only were they witnesses to it, but there are a lot of really miraculous things happened connected with it. Like, it was on a big old field, and it was very wet, been raining. The people were waiting for hours and hours for some, event to occur, like it was prophesied that it would, some sign. And it occurred, and comprised in the crowd, or some of the composition of the crowd, were journalists that were sent by the government to actually debunk the apparition. In other words, basically not only skeptical people, but negatively disposed towards it. And, Rita, I've never heard one account where anybody said this was all a bunch of baloney or it was not a valid experience. Matter of fact, to the reverse, there were thousands of conversions relative to it from that experience. So
aren't there pictures of the people kind of standing with their mouth agape? Isn't that from this
Yes, I've got pictures in the book, in the middle of the book, that show that. The book, by the way, is called Marian Apparitions Are Real. And of course, it can be gotten at Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. But what I'm saying is, yes, there's pictures of just that event. And after the dance of the sun, miraculously, this is for real, people were drenching wet just when the event occurred. After the event, their clothes were dry. I mean, in other words, we're talking about, like, for them to say a half an hour, 40 minutes, and of course that's physically impossible. But I mean, there was all kinds of dramaticism connected with it that has not been refuted in any way.
It's just amazing.
It is. It really is. There's another one. I talked about pivotal experiences. Have you ever seen in the back of a lot of Latin people's trucks? Usually they'll have like an image of the Virgin of Guadeloupe, big old portrait of the Virgin Mary and a bunch of roses, and it's frequently in the back of the truck.
With that kind of, all right, I'm just going to say this is totally incorrect, but with like the bathtub Mary, with the big circle thing around her? That's the version.
Well, it's kind of an image. It's a full body kind of image, I guess. But what it is, this is a replica of the garment that the witness Juan Diego had in 1531. In 1531, the Virgin Mary appeared to this Juan Diego, and he was just basically a Mexican peasant guy. And she told him to go to the local bishop in what's now Mexico City and have a church built on that spot. And he did what she told him, and the bishop basically patted him on the head and said, okay, fine, you come back and bring me some proof that you saw the Virgin Mary, and then we'll talk business about the church. So he went back and explained this to her and said, they're not believing me, and she said, I'll take care of that. And basically, his garment was a cloak made out of cactus husks. It was called a tilma, T-I-L-M-A. And she presented to him and arranged roses, Castilian roses, inside the cloak for him to carry back to the bishop. And remember, this was December of 1531. Mexico City's fairly high elevation. It's cold. And there were no roses blooming, period. And he presented them to the bishop when he opened up the cloak. And on the back of the cloak, when he went to present the cloak to the bishop, was this image that we've referred to, the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Now, here's where the physical evidence gets dramatic. That same garment is on display to this day in the Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico City. It's been in constant church custody since 1531, almost 500 years. It has not deteriorated. It's only been under glass for about the last 120 years. It's been exposed to humidity, heat, even arsonist attempt, all kinds of issues. And it has not deteriorated. And remember, this is fragile cactus husks. This is not, not even cloth. Anyhow, pieces of that garment have been examined by Sandia Labs engineers. And Rita, it shows no evidence of pigment, and there is no tracing. Now, any artist will tell you you've got to have tracing to have a painting, and there's none. What I'm saying, without any doubt, that is a miraculous garment. And everything, 20 different ophthalmologists have examined the image of Our Lady's eyes in the painting or the image. And what it does, now here's where it gets really sophisticated. When you and I look at each other, our eyes are curved, our lenses are curved. This causes what's called the Sampson-Purkinje effect. It's kind of a distortion effect from a curved lens. That same effect is present in her eyes in the image. 20 different ophthalmologists have examined those eyes and say, yes, that's absolutely what it is. It's the exact replica of human vision. And what I'm saying in short, Rita, is that is a miraculous element itself, because that's beyond what a human artist can depict.
And especially for a little peasant boy to be able to do something like that.
This guy was just a little farmer type. But I mean, what I'm saying is, I'm talking about this has been put under heavy-duty electron microscopes, things like that. It's been subject to many more tests than the Shroud of Turin. It's a lot more accessible, and a lot more testing has been done on it. And like I said, without question, I mean, I would stake my life on it. That's a miraculous garment. I really would. Now, that's pretty heavy evidence.
That is. We're going to come up on a break here real quick. Let me just ask, I'm hoping we can just do this real quick. Are there similarities between the people who have the experiences of the apparitions?
There are some similarities from the standpoint that a lot of them are young peasant girls and are children, mostly girls. That's the usual seer. However, Juan Diego, for example, is a 57-year-old guy. So for the most part, the only similarity would be this young peasant women in the majority.
Okay. Well, and they say when you're young, especially, preteen, that you tend to be more open to having, and I'm going to say, psychic experiences or seeing ghosts or things like that.
That's what's said.
There's the music, which means we need to take a quick break. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We're talking to Kevin Cook about his new book, Marian Apparitions Are Real. His website is marianapparitionsarereal.com, and we'll be back after.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rita Louise, the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics. Start a new career today on the leading edge of alternative health and healing. The Institute of Applied Energetics can help you to develop the specialized skills you'll need to work as an energy medicine practitioner, intuitive counselor, or professional medical intuitive. Besides our outstanding technical instruction, our programs also support you in creating and building a successful business in this rapidly growing field. Be a catalyst for changing the way healthcare is done around the world. Contact the Institute of Applied Energetics right away or visit appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Balance in all things is critical to maintaining health. In the hectic drive of today's world, many of us forget to take care of our most important asset, ourselves. At productsforthesoul.com, we want to support your effort to nurture yourself. We offer a wide variety of herbs, supplements, and high-quality, ready-to-eat, all-natural foods. We even offer holographic chip technology products that can augment the body's natural ability to increase energy, improve sleep, and mitigate pain. Best of all of our products are delivered straight to your door. It's time to start loving yourself. Visit productsforthesoul.com and let us help you along the way.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and we're talking to Kevin Cook about his new book, Marian Apparitions Are Real. In the chat room, somebody pointed out that Mary herself was a poor peasant girl. And I thought that was kind of an interesting little connect. I want to ask this question. Why Mary? Or maybe a better question is it Mary?
Are you ready for the answer?
I'm sitting down. Is that a good start?
Okay. Actually, I think it's the reason Mary is used as a messenger in this case is, of course, you remember Jesus when he was on the cross, and they were Mary and the disciple were at his feet. He did say, "Here is your mother." In other words, there were allusions to Mary as having a role beyond just a vehicle for getting him into the world. And there's some, in Revelation, they also have an allusion to the depiction of Mary in Revelation. So what I'm saying is, scripturally, there's some background for her having a role to play with humanity. That's number one. But number two, I think people feel comfortable with Mary. I guess the maternal aspect of it, say an angel with and all their grand and glory might scare people, as angels have in the past times. And I guess her being a human at one time, it was maybe a touching point that people could relate to. And as far as and she describes herself as being Mary. And while there have been demonic apparitions, by the way, that's why the church is very careful in their determination about what's valid and what's not. There have been counterfeit apparitions that have been assigned to demonic sources. For the most part.
Counterfeit? Wait, I'm going to write a note down. We're going to come down back to counterfeit apparitions. That's
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely. But what I'm saying, though, is for the most part, the ones the church has investigated and all the evidence, of course, we've just talked about just last few minutes, this is a valid item, and I believe that for the most part they're accurate and valid apparitions of Mary. And like I say, most of the messages are either prophetic, some are form of warnings, But definitely the information that's been transpired is something that has to come from a higher source than mankind. And there's been many, and I'll tell you towards the end of the show about some current seers who've come up with some really startling predictions. But I guess basically in summary about why it's Mary, because there's people feel comfortable with her and drawn to her. And there's a very excellent quote that's in the book that I thought was, kind of appropriate for why Mary. It was from St. Catherine of Siena. And I guess it was important enough to put in the book. But what it said basically is that Mary is the most sweet bait, chosen, prepared, and ordained by God to catch the hearts of men. And I guess it's just a comfortable touching point as a means to getting to God. And that's, in short, my answer.
And I'm asking because I know that with some of the Marian apparitions, the person like Bernadette of Lourdes, she just, said it was the lady or something and didn't ever really call her Mary directly. Other people called her Mary.
Well, to Bernadette, she identified herself as Mary.
Oh.
Yeah, she did. And almost, invariably, the only ones that she didn't identify herself were the non-speaking apparitions, like in Zeitoun, which is another very dramatic one in relatively recent times. But that was over a Coptic church in Egypt, and this was a silent apparition. But it was witnessed by millions of people, millions.
Has Mary ever appeared, and I'm going to say to a non-Christian person?
Well, yes. See, that was the thing, and that was very pivotal. And the Zeitoun apparitions happened predominantly between 1968 and 1970, and this occurred in Zeitoun, which is a suburb of Cairo. And what happened was, this was over a Coptic church. Coptic, basically an Eastern Orthodox version of Catholicism, or an Eastern Catholic group. And she did appear for a period of 2 years. And I mean, this was a weekly event. 3 or 4 times a week. And Rita, get this. The Egyptian government was basically a Muslim government. It was run by a man named Nasser at the time, who was a nominal Muslim, but mostly not. But this was a country that was basically antagonistic towards Christianity and Judaism and so forth, and obviously not one to endorse a phenomenon like this. They sent special forces troops a mile square around this church, door to door to door, to try to debunk the apparition, like some form of projection or whatever, and they couldn't do it. As a matter of fact, the Egyptian government finally came forward with its General Information Department and said, yes, this is a valid experience, and it's exactly what happened. And Nasser himself endorsed it. So what I'm saying is the crowds were comprised of predominantly Muslims, and who, by the way, venerate the Virgin Mary. Most people don't realize that. And Islam,
so there still would be a tie to Mary.
Yes, there is, yes. But there, she's appeared in this group. I'm sure there's agnostics in that group too, who just didn't have a predisposed belief. But Muslims don't venerate her to the extent that Catholics or Christians would, but they still, acknowledge her as a special person. And
right.
So I guess she has appeared to a multi-religious group. There was Jews involved in that Cairo experience too. So yes, and we're talking. The picture that's in the book, that's taken from Arab television. They've estimated between 2 and 14 million people saw this apparition during that period. Paris Match, magazine Stern in Germany, very big, like a Time magazine form of magazine in Germany, that its counterpart. And the New York Times all sent reporters to investigate this phenomenon. All of them were quite struck with the validity of it.
And there's pictures.
There's pictures, and those pictures. There's pictures have all been examined by experts. There's no shenanigans. The Vatican had observers, even though this was in the Coptic Church's jurisdiction. The Vatican still sent, observers, and they all were, certain that it was a valid experience. And that same event was replicated in the fall of 2009 in a similar suburb of Cairo. And that event was also authenticated by the Coptic Church. Most people don't realize this, but it sure has happened in recent times, too. I guess that's
part that I think is interesting is that those pictures are so clear, but, people that are going after UFOs or looking for, and have claims about UFOs don't get such good pictures.
Well, see, that's been my stress in this, and is that, like I said, I've been interested in other fields. UFOs interest me, and I'm interested in ghosts to a certain extent. But what I'm saying is, the fellow that wrote the foreword and the recommendation of my book, Dr. Tim Barth, he's the head of the TCU psychology department. He's a ghost hunter, and he's also a Catholic. And he said in his full foreword, he says that he's amazed that we'll see some little glimmer of an orb, which could very possibly be a particle of dust that's reflected light. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but it's certainly not as distinctive as what we're just talking about. No. The evidence is so superior in this field, it makes ghost hunting look like a joke, and that's the truth. Not because I wrote the book, because it's just flat true.
They're all chasing after that elusive piece of evidence, but
right.
In this field,
the evidence is stacked in this field. It is stacked. That's what, like I say, that's what was so intriguing. Is the more you delve into it, the more you were drawn into it. Because if there was if anywhere along these investigations, I'd have said, oh well, if it's just spurious, that's it. But no, every page I unturned was another validation that this is a true phenomenon, really.
But I'm going to throw a little devil advocate thing out there.
Okay.
It seems like, if you talk about Mary or if you talk about Jesus, then the Catholic Christian element will get on board. But if you talk about a ghost,
right,
it's evil. And how do they make a separation between the ghost of Mary, or whatever, and Grandma?
Well, even Jesus alluded to ghosts in the Bible. He did. And, the witch of Endor in the Bible, Old Testament, raised the ghost of Solomon, the prophet Solomon, stuff like that. Samuel. But what it is Samuel. But what it is I think there is a valid phenomenon of ghosts. Now, I don't mean to put that whole phenomenon down. There's something to ghosts. Jesus alluded to them. The Bible alluded to them. Every civilization, from the Eskimos to the Asians in China, have had ghost stories. Every civilization known to man has had ghostly experiences. Okay, but I guess I contrast the two things with the holy and the not holy. And like, for example, other shows, they've talked about UFOs and things of this nature, and I've got no problem with there being aliens, but I kind of feel they're kind of part of the landscape, and this is a little different category. That's how I distinguish between, say, a vision of Mary and a vision of old Aunt Phyllis or something like that.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned counterfeit apparitions.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about that. And do you have some examples?
Well, potential examples.
Wannabe apparitions.
Right. Now, in the back of the book, I was fortunate to get a chart from the International Marian Research Institute. It's part of the University of Dayton. It's the foremost group that analyzes Marian apparitions in the world. And they let me use that chart. And the chart is dated from 1900 to the present day, the 110 years. And in essence, it shows a couple hundred different Marian apparitions. And in most of them, there's no disposition assigned to them. It's like unknown. Just like in, probably a police blotter. A lot of crimes, if they occurred, or investigations in general, there's no disposition because there's just not enough evidence. But in some of them, they have actually had a negative decision as to the apparition, that it was not valid. And the general, it's potentially possible, and I don't want to start a war here, but it's potentially possible that the vision in Conyers, Georgia in the 1990s may have been a counterfeit apparition. I can't speak with any grand authority on that, except because most of my emphasis was on apparitions that were actually 100% 24 karat. That's the only ones I presented in the book that were actually stone cold authenticated. But my understanding is there have been counterfeit apparitions where the intention is to mislead the public and to put their faith in the apparition, and if it's punctured, then that would overall decrease faith in Christianity in general. And there have actually been exorcisms connected with some apparitions. And so, I mean, that's the real thrust of it. But like I say, the church is very deliberate. They check into the seers and their truthfulness, and of course they examine physical evidence like we've alluded to before, and everything connected around it. And if they come up with something that looks spurious, and they have at different times, that they'll have a negative decision, and that's mentioned in several times in that chart, negative decisions. And they are the source of these. Now, I'm not saying there's some smoke and fire around them, but that they feel that if it doesn't validate Christianity and it has a negative import, and the main emphasis of it would be to undermine the faith, and then it's assumed to have a demonic orientation.
Fair enough. Do, the face of Jesus in a potato, or, marrying your piece of toast.
Right.
Does that, I'll say, phenomena fall under this category too, or is that?
I think that's more innocent nonsense. The mind has a tendency to do what's called matrixing, which is like when you're looking at clouds, you'll see like a horse or a rowboat or whatever the cloud might look like. And the mind tries to put order out of disorder. And, and enough images out there, you're bound to see something that could be, and I've seen many of the ones you're referring to, like the piece of toast or Mary's image in a little tree or against a wall. And in Clearwater, Florida, there was an image where Mary's image may have been seen in some stained glass or some glass in an office building that may have become discolored. But most of that is matrixing, where it's just you're trying to look for something and make sense of it. And if it has some vague form of the Virgin Mary, you say, well, that's it, but it's not. And I don't really see that as demonic. I see that as just people kind of jumping the gun on things, really.
And so that's not even something the church would investigate?
No, they just kind of dismiss that and say, well, just people that are, anxiously looking for something that's not there. But we're talking about real sophisticated demonic stuff in the other example.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the clock, making sure I ask all my important questions. Many of the Marian apparitions that have happened over time, or the ones that people are, I'm going to say, more familiar with, happened in the 1500s, 1600s. Fatima was the early 1900s.
Right.
Have there been recent reports of apparitions, in the last 30 years or so?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Medjugorje has been an ongoing apparitional site for 30 years, since the early 80s. And the church right now has a commission under Cardinal Ruini who's supposed to come to grips with, is this a valid phenomenon or not? I mean, they haven't had a real disposition of it, but my initial thoughts are that it's valid. There's a picture on the front of the book that I got from a lady in my church that's resulted from her and her companion going to Medjugorje on a pilgrimage. And the photo was of the hill where the seers initially saw the apparition of the Virgin Mary. And the woman took the photo without any image being on it. And when that image was developed, a figure of the Virgin Mary was seen in the background. In other words, this was a miraculous event. These people weren't making any money on this. This woman that works in the church, she's the wife of a deacon, she's a liturgist at the church. That's her whole life is the Catholic Church. And she's not making any money on it. I don't know, you sold books. I can say I'm not making much money on it. But what I'm saying is this is a really, truly valid, magical, mystical experience with this photo. It's a miraculous piece of material. And that image was superimposed on the photo. They gave it to me because they knew I was writing a book on these matters. And this, along with a lot of the Guadeloupe emphasis and evidence, it stands once again head and shoulders over a lot of ghostly photos and UFO photos. So that's a recent apparitional event. And also there's another seer named Pedro Regis, who the local bishop in Brazil has basically given preliminary okay to, not full acceptance, but preliminarily. He predicted the Haitian earthquake from messages from the Virgin Mary, and also the Gulf oil disaster. And this is as of earlier this past year. So this is a very right-on current live time. His name is Pedro Regis, and he has a website on the internet, and his messages from the Virgin Mary are written down and tabulated on that website. And he predicted the Gulf oil disaster like in March of this past year, and of course it happened July, August area, and that's pretty well hitting it right on the nailhead there. So that's very dramatic.
And so is his a visual apparition, or is he like
he has visual apparitions?
Auditory?
Well, he has both auditory and visual, and she basically relays messages to him. He compiles these messages and puts them on his website. People that work with him, and like I say, the absolute accuracy of them is just astounding.
And in that situation, are other people also seeing the apparition?
No, I think he's a sole visionary of it, to my understanding.
That's an interesting question. In many of these apparition situations, I mean, you talked about some where multiple people, hundreds of people, have seen an apparition. Is that a more common phenomena, or is it more common that it's just a couple of individuals having these experiences and then documenting their observations? Well,
certainly by sheer numbers, the severe majority is that it's 2 or 3 people, usually. It's usually not a lone seer, although sometimes a lone seer, but the norm is 2 or 3 people, but a single visionary is very frequently the case. The ones with the tremendous numbers like Zeitoun, Egypt, that I mentioned, Fatima, of course, and Batania in Venezuela in the 80s and 90s, that had probably 250,000 witnesses. So, I mean, it varies. In other words, there's a lot of variance in the number of witnesses.
I just think that's interesting, especially in the more recent ones, that you don't hear anything. Maybe in the church you would hear stuff about that, but in even in the, as I like to say, in the alternative field, why aren't the UFO people jumping on it? Why aren't the ghost people jumping on it? Because it seems like it would kind of be
I know, but see, here's what
similar
I've dealt with
cross area.
I know, but here's what it is. People are scared of religion. I mean, I think that's what it is. And I went round and round with George Norrie about that on Coast to Coast, as he's trying to blackjack me into saying, well, this has something to do with the UFO. Well, no, it doesn't. And he said, it's the aliens. Well, look, we're talking prophecy, we're talking physical evidence, we're talking miraculous cures, we're talking photos. Isn't that asking an awful lot of the aliens, was my response. Even if it was aliens trying to phony up apparition of the Virgin Mary, what is their motive? To promote Catholicism? I mean, that's a little weak. In other words, I think it is what it is. But I think what it is people are more comfortable dealing with elements of the paranormal that are not threatening, because to be candid, Rita, if God's really there, he's sending messengers, you might have to respond to it somehow. You might have to behave yourself or something. Whereas if you're just, seeing a UFO, well, so what? But I think that's the reason. Although I've been on quite a few UFO shows, oriented shows, and they're open to it. But basically, I think the reason more people don't cover it is because ghosts are not threatening, really. They're kind of something to be intrigued with, not be threatened by. And UFOs are certainly fascinating, but they're not necessarily threatening, but you might actually once again have to respond to the idea of the Virgin Mary really showing up and God being around. That's something you might have to behave yourself over. That's my answer as best I know it.
One of the things that you mentioned, and I know that in sites like Lourdes, it has become an internationally known place of healing where people go to partake in the waters there.
Yep.
Has that kind of phenomena transpired in other locations where there have been apparitions?
Absolutely. There have been healings connected with almost every apparitional site. Everyone. Almost everyone. Lourdes, of course, is the most notable, but just literally everyone. Britannia, there's thousands of them. In the back of the book is a picture of Our Lady of Knock shrine in Ireland, and there's a whole wall full of crutches that have been left behind by people that were crippled and left the shrine grounds walking and things of this nature. So yes, it's replete through the whole phenomenon as healings connected with it. Yes.
And this is years after the sightings. We're not talking during the period that the sightings were going on.
Oh, in the Knock instance, it was all after the sightings. Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I got a lot of information from my book from the museum at Knock that's run by the church up there, and they have a medical bureau that examines the cures and makes sure they're valid phenomena themselves. And in other words, everything's pretty well documented, and just because you say you're cured, they have to make sure this guy really had a history of such and so forth, and they're well documented. So yes, I mean, we're talking literally thousands of cures that have been validated, yeah. So that just wants one more little validation of the whole experience.
Yeah, I don't know that, the aliens, I mean, you present a very interesting case, because when you talk about, like, the whole UFO thing and the aliens, you don't hear any stories about them wanting to heal anything. It's more about missing time and, them doing sexual things to you on the ships and stuff like that. Not about, go to this place and, hang out and get some water or whatever and you'll be cured.
No. It's. I have to believe, and actually, by the way, Rita, the Catholic Church has made noises in the last couple of years that they're basically in a round Robin Hood's barn way acknowledging the existence of aliens. You've had statements by the people in the Vatican Observatory that, we look at them as our space brothers or our spiritual brothers, if you will. And see, they do things in a very diplomatic way. I mean, they've been doing what they've been doing for 2,000 years, and they have, I'm not saying everything's wonderful with the church, but they do have a notion of being pastoral and non-threatening and very deliberate in what they do. And they're basically in a round Robin Hood's barn way acknowledging the existence of aliens. Yes, they are. There was a guy who was a Monsignor named Corrado Balducci who was he died last year, but he was a very prominent person in that he was a frequent guest at various UFO conventions. And he was theoretically retired, but Rita, he lived in the Vatican. He didn't do anything he wasn't supposed to be told to do. And he was basically the Vatican's de facto point man at these UFO conventions. And that's just his position. And so there are UFOs, there are aliens. What place they play in the whole gambit of things, I don't know. But I do say this, that in Genesis chapter 6, they made allusions to watchers, which were some kind of beings other than mankind. And I believe they're probably aliens.
Well, and on that note, Kevin, we need to say goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your information about Marian Apparitions. This has just really been interesting.
Well,
and I think my listeners have enjoyed it.
Well, I hope so. Thank you, Ray.
That's Kevin Cook, and his book is Marian Apparitions Are Real. His website is marianapparitionsAreReal.com, and we will be back with Jason Martell after these messages.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Good deep inside yourself and venture into the realm of the unconscious mind with my Meditating on the Kabbalah guided imagery audio CDs. Discover who you are and what you want in life. Meditating on the Kabbalah can help you to open, clear, and revitalize the energetic pathways of your subtle being. They will support you in your spiritual quest by helping you to access the profound insights and inner guidance you need as you work in alignment with your highest good. Let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may keep you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. Treat yourself to some soulful nourishment and an expansion of your concept of who and what you are. Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4 brings the whole subject of energy medicine into vivid reality, where it provides you with fascinating insights and a deeper understanding of who you are as an energetic being. Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4 will provide you with a roadmap to understanding the influences subtle energy plays in our experience of physical, mental, and emotional health, and the manifestation of disease in the body. It will also help you to realign your body, mind, and spirit so that they function in harmony with one another, thus allowing you to experience inner peace, self-awareness, and centeredness. You can get your copy of Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4 at www.soulhealer.com. How would you like to live long and enjoy great health? How about creating solid bones and whiter teeth? Strengthen your heart and eyes and have radiant, youthful-looking skin. There is an ancient health and longevity secret that has been used for millennia in Egypt, India, and China that can help you achieve this. For the first time in the modern world, Pearlsium brings this ancient wellness secret to you. For more information about Pearlsium, visit www.productsforthesoul.com. Before we get back to the show, I would like to thank all of you for tuning into Just Energy Radio. Many of the people I've helped over the years were listeners just like you. If you're at a junction in your life, don't stand alone at this important time. Call me or send me an email. We can set up a private consultation so that you too can experience health, healing, and wholeness in your life. To find out more about the services I offer, visit www.soulhealer.com.